I mean, building your brand is, one of the most important like long-term decisions that you can do. And, bad branding and good branding, they can go hand in hand. So, um, I think people forget about how a bad branding decision can have repercussions and ripple effects that can last years and years later because there's people chatting behind your back. When you're asked, "Hey, can I get a reference? Oh, you use this company. How did you like them?" Well, they were okay at this, but this, and then all of a sudden that little bit of doubt comes into a person, and that can affect their, whether they sign a contract or not. Using an example, there's this large software company that I work with for my CRM system, and we've been in discussions with them that one of their modules is something that hasn't really been working for us. We've told them over multiple months that this is an issue and we'd like to get out of this contract. And they came back and they said, well, hey, you did sign this contract with us and we just don't feel like we should let you out of it. Now, this is a company where we have, like I said, a multiple pronged relationship with, and it would be kind of easy for them to make the long-term good brand decision and just say, hey, you know what? You guys are a great customer. We're so sorry this didn't work out for you guys. Go ahead and go use that other company. We're going to be working behind the scenes and we want to get another shot later on. But instead, now what they're doing is saying no. And now I'm looking at the whole relationship and saying, well, God, if they're going to act like this right now, how are they going to act, when I ask for another favor later or ask to get, something structured differently. And it's like, I'm the customer. And I feel like if you're not asking for something completely unreasonable, you really have to go out of way to serve your customers. And so, so that's something that, I've always done in our business is we want to have the highest level of integrity with our customers. For example, we were in contract to buy a couple of buildings right at the time. So March 2020, COVID hits, world goes into lockdown. We're non-refundable on these loans. These are big loans. One I think was like 50 million. The other one was like 40. So, and we have these huge deposits, up with the lender that's basically there to kind of lock our interest rate in as we're getting ready to close. Well, we decided to walk from the properties and not close them. And we immediately just, gave the millions of dollars to the lender because we wanted to be in their good graces. And it was, not a good situation for any of us, but I know that CBRE and Freddie Mac, had always stood behind us when we were trying to borrow money, and it was a great, important relationship. And so I'd rather walk from that money and be able to go back and do a deal with them later than to fight them over that money and kind of over a short-term situation when we're borrowing billions and billions of dollars from them. So I think kind of looking at both of those things together, it's like, all right, what can I do? Make a short-term decision that benefits me and makes me happy right now, but I'm pissing off this customer. Or I can make the right long-term decision, and then maybe the words that are going on behind our back are words that are of, hey, wow, that's a great company. I had this one issue with them. They totally let me out of the contract. I love the rest of their product line. So I would totally recommend you do that. Maybe I wouldn't recommend it unless they fix these one or two things. Now you're having a real dialogue with your customers. But on the other side, I'm just gonna be like, no, those guys suck. They were a pain in the ass. They wouldn't let me out of a contract. I had to hire an attorney to get out of it. And those are the exact things that a business owner is going to be like, red flag, red flag. And so I just don't understand when people make those decisions, and even if they're hurting financially, or the person that's making the decision runs that department and he's been having some leakage out of that department because their product's inferior, then, but you got to just know as a business, if you start seeing these decisions come out, that you're not supporting your brand. Yeah. I mean, your reputation is, I think, the most important thing that you have, because people are going to talk to each other. And, I know if I'm doing a business deal with someone, that person that I'm going to do a business deal with is definitely going to ask someone else in my industry, hey, what do you know about them? How are they to work with? Are they actually who they say they are? And I want to make sure that behind the scenes, it's like, hey, Greenleaf is a good company. They do what they say they're going to do. They follow through, and it's extremely important. I think a lot of times salespeople, they're on the front lines and they're not executing on the back. So it's really good to be down in the weeds with your brand to make sure that, hey, are my customer support people, are they actually following through with what we're saying at the top? So it's not just I'm selling this over here and then everyone else is going to do this, because then you have like a kind of a brand dislocation. And I think that can be very damaging because you don't even know what's going on negatively. I was using another example was I've been with this bank for 10 years, US Bank. Thank you guys. And I asked for a very small request, and, which was basically just saying, hey, can I get a statement that we've worked together for 10 years and I've always paid my line of credit on time? And after a week, I still couldn't get this, simple request done. And it's just like that kind of thing I was actually already unhappy with this bank because they've had all these issues with treasury management, and, I've had this relationship for a while, and it's a painful change, so you're kind of like, I think they rely on the fact that they know there's all this integrated, and it's difficult to like move out. So it has to be a good financial reason, but then there's also, hey, are you guys going to stand behind me and do what I need when you say? And if you're not, then you're not a good partner. And I think when you're having these interconnected relationships with like that software company that I use, or like this bank, we're business partners. And if you don't act like one, then, that's when you start looking for other partners. This actually brings me to thinking about another situation. I'm an investor in a bar here in Pleasanton, and our landlord is an absolute, piece of work. He does not even care if we survive as a business. I mean, we're going to him, we're showing him our financials. We're hitting our sales targets, but you're passing through all these costs. You don't care if we survive as a business. And, if we go out of business and it's like all of a sudden that money's out the door, there's zero chance that anyone else out there in the market is going to pay anywhere even close to that, because you can't survive on that rent payment. So we're trying to tell him, hey, we're out of whack here. You own the space. We get it. You need to make, your mortgage payments, whatever. But he's trying to make like a little bit of money on us on top of that. And, it's kind of like the situation that, he's thinking only about himself and not the fact that if we go out of business and we walk, then he's out, $15,000, $18,000 a month. And I bet the most he can get for rent on that space, all in, is going to be 10 grand, because no one else can survive at the rent he's making us pay. I had some businesses in one of my apartment buildings up in Vancouver, Washington, a cycle bar and a yoga spot. They were having some issues. The COVID was there. You're not getting throughput traffic. They had 6 feet distancing. So instead of being able to have, 100 cyclists in there, they can have 20, right? It's obviously going to affect your revenue. So I'm like, hey, do I really want that cycle bar and that yoga business to like leave out of my building? And then now I got to go rip out all this equipment. I got to go find a new tenant. Instead I went to them and said, hey guys, what can I do to be a better business partner with you guys so that we can survive for the long term together? And so we reworked the leases, and in exchange for doing that, they've been making on-time payments, and their business is starting to pick up. And I know in the long term, we'll get back to where we need to get to. So you cannot just only think about yourself when you have a dual relationship. I think it's just horrible for your brand. And, for example, that landlord, if I ever saw a building that he owned, I would never go into business into any one of his spaces. And I would tell everyone, do not lease a space from that guy. He's horrible. If you're making a decision between like, hey, should I give into this, or should I, play hardball with them? It's like, how important is that relationship? And if it's like a relationship that's going to have value for you long term, you always have to choose a relationship. I get it if it's someone that's been pissing you off and they've been a tough client, and maybe you're like, hey, I don't really care if they leave, then you could play a little bit hardball with them. But if it's someone you're going to be in business with, you have to choose a relationship. There's been so many times where I stopped paying myself, to make sure that my lenders were paid, to make sure that my employees were paid. Times where, always putting other people first. I mean, I think that's just been always how I ran the business, is to make sure that all the stakeholders are paid before I get paid. And if they're not going to get paid, I'm not going to get paid ahead of them. I mean, I know of so many people that, they're like, oh, hey, I made, $30-50 million and all my investors lost all their money, but at least I'm okay. And then it's kind of like, yeah, but I mean, how do you feel about that? And so I feel like every decision I've made has been made with integrity, and I can sleep at night knowing that I didn't mess anyone over for my own benefits. There's so many people that just do not care. They just are. I mean, I've met people where they're just like, I'm going to get where I'm going to get, and I'll just stomp on everyone for it. And that's fine. I mean, there are people like that, and you have to be wary of them, because I think when you're a good person, you have to be careful, because other people will come in. And so you kind of have to be like around like people that maybe are like that. You got to be a little tougher, with them. But I mean, if someone's just going along and you're the person in control, and you basically control all the finances, that's a big responsibility. And I think the difference is, maybe there's a person that you're in a relationship with, but that person's not in control of the money. Maybe you are, or you only get to choose when you put the money in. Then it's kind of like, all right, well, I know that person is just trying to make a lot of money, so I'm just not going to, I'm going to be very slow with my relationship. But if you're the person that's controlling capital, I mean, and people really, that's people's livelihoods. It's retirement. So you just can't just treat it like it's nothing. So remember we were talking about when I was like, oh, how I hire someone is kind of like, how is their car? How's their room? It's like, that's who the person is. Like, you can pretend like you're someone, but then it's like, well, hey, do you really look after your family? Do you, hey, I act with integrity. I do all this stuff. Well, have you really done that in your real life? Have you really, went out of your way? Like, I've went out of my way so many times to like let my friends into deals where we've made, 10, 12x multiples just because I was like, hey, I got an inside track on something. There's some risk, but I know that I've de-risked it. And it's like, I could take all that money myself, but I know like my friends are, trying to put kids through college. He's got other stuff going on. I gotta help them out. I gotta give them a lift, And that's just like a small example of like, not being like, oh, I need all the money. Right. So it's like, imagine a deal where I'm like, oh, I could put in 500,000 myself, and I could make $5 or $6 million, right? But instead, I'm going to put in 250,000, and I'm going to go share that with other people that they're putting $10,000, $25,000 in at a time, and then all of a sudden they get 100,000, 250,000 back, and
that's a college tuition.
That's a college tuition, and that is like been like probably one of the greatest like joys I've ever had, is to be able to return like money to like friends and family like that. Oh man, the definition of richness and wealthness is the people that you're around, the love, the experiences you have with them. I mean, richness is being able to open up your favorite bottle of wine in a beautiful location with all the people that you love, and just feeling content with who you are. I mean, that's the greatest feeling that there is in the world. I mean, having a new car and new watch or whatever. I mean, I just got rid of a car because I realized, I was like, oh, I got rid of my Porsche. I realized I didn't need an extra. So I'm like, I'm going to get something that's like, more practical. It's like, and I think that's over time, like you kind of start to learn to change what your definition of wealthiness is and richness is, and like what really it makes you happy. And it's those small moments where you can enjoy the fruits of your labor with your family and friends, and just be at peace. Well, I think the first thing, the key is to kind of be very present. I think when you're always worried about the future or having all the baggage of the past, you can't appreciate the moment that you're in. And, I love saying that when you're working on something, actually enjoy the work, because that is like the joy, right? It's not in the success or the finished product. I mean, I know artists that have like made like beautiful paintings, beautiful music, And all they remember was actually drawing it or recording it. And when they actually listen to it, they're like, oh, I'm tired of listening to it. I'm tired of looking at it. It's like, but I loved that process of making that song or drawing that painting. And so I think richness is being in that moment and not worried about what happened before and not worried about what's going to happen in the future, but just like being right there. Don't work with friends and family. I mean, I think you can work with friends and family, but it has to be in a very defined structure. Like it has to be like, hey guys, here's what we're going to do. You could lose all your money, or here's this. Now, would I ever go into business with a friend or family, like where we're partners on something for a lot? No, I think that's kind of where things can go awry, just because I think there's going to be a lot of instances where you or he or she will have some expectation because of your closeness and familiar relationship that things will go unsaid over time. And then the blowups will be real because you're like, well, hey, I grew up with this person, I'm going to tell them how I feel, but I've done business with friends where it's like I mentioned, like, hey, if you guys want to invest with me in this deal, I'm happy to take your money in. But and other times when it's kind of like, hey, do you want to partner up on this together? I'm usually like, no, let's not go into business together. Cause you never know what you're going to get with a partner anyways. And it's not worth like losing the relationship. So, but I think on certain instances, there can be some benefits to it, and you can make a lot of friends out of business too. So, and then then you can continue to do business with those people. I just think as you have these long relationships with someone, there's, I think, too much familiarity that will lead to like a lot of unsaid, a lot of passive aggressive behavior, I think. Yeah, exactly. I think you hire someone that you know who they are, but you're not necessarily like, I grew up with this person. I think that's the difference. It's like, hey, I met John, 10 years ago at an industry event, and him and I like see each other, 3 or 4 times a year. Maybe we play golf, maybe we go out to lunch. We chat about the industry, we chat about life. So I kind of know them and I kind of know what they stand for. I hear what other people might say about them. You're able to kind of get a better picture, like versus like someone you met like 2 months ago. You have no idea who that person is. And I guarantee you, they're not telling you everything just because they're probably in the same stage where you are, where you're like, hey, what do I need from this person? What do I want to get out of it? Let me put on my best representation of myself. So if you could have a characteristic that you're driven by, and I think it's persistence. I think the most important thing you can do is to figure out who you are as a person, what you want to become, and then just do not stop working. I see so many people that they're just getting close. They're like, hey, I want to be, all these kids, like, I want to be in business. Or, I want to be a salesperson. And they work in a sales job for like 6 months. Oh, I'm just not selling anything. And it's like, well, you've only been doing it for 6 months. It's like, go do that shit for 16 years and then tell me you're not getting good at it. You're going to get good. You have to be persistent at your skill. You have to really fight through the obstacles. I was actually even thinking about me recording these videos. I was getting frustrated because I didn't feel like I liked who I was on camera. I didn't like looking at myself. And then I had to like kind of take a step back and says, well, hey, I've never done this before. So it's like any other skill. I need to work at it. I have to be persistent. And it's what always has got me anywhere in life is to like just stop, assess the situation. Is this something I can work at and get better at? And if it is, then persevere. Go push at it. How much do you really want it? You have to work on it. You have to work on your craft. I don't care, what that craft is. I mean, Steph Curry shoots the ball day after day after day. He's the greatest shooter of all time because he works at it. And I think people forget that amount of work that goes in to be great. And so if you want to be great at something, you have to be persistent. You have to have the work ethic, and you can't give up just because there's a few bad days. There's a little rain on the horizon. It's just like, you got to fight through it. If you love something, I wouldn't stop going after it. I mean, it's worth the work. I mean, it's the effort is going to pay off. My son, he loves basketball, and actually I made him a song about if you wake up in the morning and you do the work, it will pay off. And it's like time after time, he was like, "Oh, I'll never get to where I want to get. I'll never be able to dunk a basketball." Was actually one thing we talked about, and all of a sudden, he's 16 years old and he dunks, and it was just like out of nowhere. And I said, "See, you did the work. You did all the things that you said you needed to do, and then all of a sudden you did." And all of a sudden he started to actually believe in himself, which that was like the light went on for him. It's like, oh, actually, if I do keep working, I will get better. It was the same thing, with me. I think I started my business and I was like, I'm never going to be able to raise money. I started in 2004 and I was raising like such a little bit amount of money. And I was like, we're never going to be a big company because we can't raise any money. In 2008 hit, we couldn't raise a dime for like 3 years. It was just, $0. But you know what? It was like, I kept taking meetings. I just kept pushing through and I just kept fighting because I had a goal that I was going to raise $100 million. And then all of a sudden in 2014, I was like, oh shit, we raised $150 million. And it was like, I wasn't even actually excited. I just was like, wow, we did it. And I think that was when you look at it, it was 10 years it took me to raise that amount of money. So it wasn't like I just woke up and it was there. It was a grind. But it was a persistence. Like I really wanted to do it. And I think that's important in anything in life, And so when you say, when should you give up? I don't think you should ever give up if you love something. If it's your dream, then just keep going after it. If you kind of want it, you're going to stop working at it. I think that's the reality. You can kind of want a lot of things. You could, hey, I kind of would like to, be a, successful, musician, or I kind of, but it's like, how hard are you practicing? I mean, I think you can tell if you really love something or if you just like the idea of it. And so if you're waking up every day and that hunger is there, like if you're like, man, if this is the only thing on my mind is to get this goal, then keep working at it. But if it's just kind of like a passing fancy of like, oh, this would be kind of cool to, be a surfer or whatever it is that you decide is kind of like your, passion of the day, then yeah, of course, don't work through it. But if you really want to be good at something and that's on your mind all the time, then persistence is the key.